The steady smell of smoke and leather, the city lights kept thin lines across the floor-to-ceiling windows. KIMTAEHYUNG sat behind his desk like a monarch on cold stone. The file Jungkook had brought earlier now fan open before him. He folded his hands, face unreadable. "Boss," Hyman said, voice composed, "you ask for everything on the leaves and Lee Min-soo's estate." "I pulled civil registries, corporate ledgers, the notary records, and the old council files linked to Min-soo's companies." Taehyung raised a brow. "Speak." Hyman clicked his laptop open and slid it toward him. "Min-soo left a will. It's notarized, dated 2 months before his death. Primary beneficiary, his daughter, Lee Yn. Secondary, if she could not be located, there were limited trusts set up. But after his death, those trusts were mismanaged and, more importantly, key documents were refiled by a law firm tied to Lee Han-jun." He tapped a folder. "Look here." The will was acknowledged by what looked like legitimate counsel, but the signatures and the original notary stamps don't match the archival originals. Someone changed beneficiaries in practice, used demand letters to seize control of assets, and hid the transfers as administrative restructuring. The family used those documents to claim Min-soo's assets as theirs. Taehyung's jaw tightened. He didn't need to ask the obvious question. His fingers already traced the photo of Yn Jungkook had handed him earlier. So they built their life on his sweat and on a lie. Hyman's face was flat. Exactly. Legally, the title chain is messy, but not irreversible if we can produce the original will or prove the originals were altered, freeze disputed assets with emergency injunctions, file criminal complaints for forgery and fraud against those who benefited, publicly expose the manipulation, then we can force a court to recognize Yn as the rightful heir and restore her legal title. A slow smile crossed Taehyung's face, cold, satisfied, and the public exposure. "Media will follow the legal action," Hyman replied, a hint, then a leak. "The Lees are socially powerful because no one knows the truth. Blow the truth up and their allies disappear. Their name collapses under scandal. Banks will freeze accounts, board seats will be lost." Taehyung tapped the table twice. "Good, I want the assets preserved until we hand them to her. No greedy vultures, no quiet settlements." Hyman nodded. "We'll file an emergency petition this week. I already arranged for a subpoena to retrieve original notary records and a motion to compel surviving staff testimony. There's enough for probable cause." Jungkook, who had been silent in the corner, stepped forward. "And the Lees, when the courts move, they'll scream. They'll bribe, threaten, beg. We make sure begging doesn't work." Taehyung's eyes darkened in the low light. "Make them beg publicly." "Hyman," he said quietly, "make it clear in every filing. The assets are to be restored and then placed in trust under Lee Yn's legal guardianship. I want her rights recognized first. I want every legal barrier removed so she can claim everything Min-soo intended. No loopholes." Taehyung's hand closed around a glass. "No, she gets control sooner. She's been robbed of years already." He looked up, cold steel and something human threaded together. "And one more thing, make sure whatever we do humiliates them. I want every headline to carry their names beside forgery and fraud." Hyman's expression didn't betray surprise. He'd expected it. "Consider it done." Taehyung stood, a silhouette by the window. "Prepare the motions, freeze their accounts. Leak a controlled dossier to the right reporter once we've filed. Then watch them crumble." Jungkook's smirk was small but satisfied. "And Lee Yn." Taehyung's gaze was distant but certain. "She will have back what they stole. And when she stands before them as the rightful heir, they will understand the price of their cruelty." Hyman closed his briefcase. "I'll be ready at dawn." As the lawyer left, Taehyung lingered, staring at the city that had been bought and sold 1,000 times over. He felt the plan lock into place like a machine. Legal pressure, public scandal, and a ruthless execution of every lever he commanded. But under the cold calculation was something quieter, a promise he had made to himself in a voice no one had heard. He would give her justice not for mercy, but because taking what the Lees had stolen was a precise kind of righteousness. And because somewhere beneath his hunger for vengeance, he wanted to see the girl who offered him $62 smile with something that wasn't fear. Jungkook poured the coffee with the same steady hands he used for everything clean, efficient, never wasted motion. He set the cup down in front of Taehyung and watched for the twitch that told him when the boss had had enough of something. "Boss," Jungkook said bluntly, folding his hands on the desk, "we plan to use this girl as bait. She's a tool. Why are we suddenly turning this into a charity case? If we expose the Lees publicly, we get everything anyway. Why hand the spoils to her?" Taehyung's fingers paused over the glass. The steam from the coffee curled up, and for a moment the only sound in the room was the slow tick of the clock. Jungkook pushed, "Softer now. We could keep the assets, sell them off quietly. Use them to strengthen our network. We don't owe her anything." A faint, almost private smile touched Taehyung's mouth. He didn't look at Jungkook. He looked through the floor-to-ceiling window at the city lights, where the world kept spinning, ignorant of their design. "Because I want to destroy them in broad daylight," Taehyung said finally. His voice was low, deliberate, not some quiet cut in the night. "They deserve the humiliation of exposure. I want them to stand in court and have the whole city read what they did." He tapped his finger on the table once, like the closing of a deal. "And I want their empire taken back to the person it belongs to." Jungkook's brow knit, "So we give her everything. And they suffer the shame. That's generous. Why?" Taehyung's gaze darkened. For a breath he looked very older than his years. Then his eyes slid to the file on the desk, and he remembered the thin, crumpled envelope in a trembling hand, the $62. The memory hit him like a slap. The girl standing before him, offering every cent she had as if it could buy her life. He could almost hear her voice. I will give you this money, please. Let me go." It should have been ridiculous. It should have been contemptible. Instead, it lodged in the soft place under his ribs, small, ridiculous, but unbearably human. "She offered me $62, Taehyung murmured, almost to himself. $62 as a bribe. She thought she really thought that was a ransom. She thought money would buy her life. She didn't know what the world costs. Jungkook's expression shifted. He tracked the invisible moment that had changed something in Taehyung. "So you're protecting the insulted heir because of sentiment." He tried to make a joke out of it, but it came out hollow. Taehyung's lip twitched. He leaned forward, fixing Jungkook with a stare so steady it felt like a test. "Do a good deed, Jungkook. Maybe God will forgive sinners like us and send us to heaven." The words were deliberately absurd. Jungkook's mouth opened, then closed. He looked at Taehyung, searching for the amusement or the mockery he usually found there, but instead saw steel and something else beneath it that made him uneasy. A decision that wasn't purely tactical. Jungkook nodded once, slow, restrained. He knew better than to argue when Taehyung had already decided. But his mind didn't obey the nod. It raced. "Hyung caught your eye." The thought slid in, sharp and unspoken. That girl, why her? He had seen Taehyung's look when she handed that envelope. Not amusement, not disgust, and odd, small respect. And tonight, Taehyung wanted to give the Lees their public execution and hand the spoils to the little mouse. Jungkook finished his coffee in a single, controlled swallow. "I'll draft the motions. Park Hymin will handle the forensic files. We push this through fast and loud. But boss, keep your distance. This is a game. Don't get tangled in feelings." Taehyung's smile was a shadow. "Feelings get tangled only if you let them, Jungkook. We're above that." Jungkook looked away. He didn't believe it, not entirely. But he'd follow the plan. He always did. As Jungkook left the study to begin the legal assault, Taehyung remained at the window, the city's neon bleeding into the dark. In the quiet, he allowed the memory of the girl's trembling hands to stay with him. It was a small thing, a stupid, childish offering, but it had lodged like a splinter he hadn't meant to feel. He would use the law to strip the Lees bare in the open, and then he would place what was theirs back where it belonged, he'd make them bleed in the daylight. And maybe if the world was generous and cruel in equal measure, he'd see that naive, brave face again and know she had been given back what was stolen. The plan was set. The execution would be merciless. But for the first time in a long time, Taehyung felt something close to a promise, whispered into a long, empty room. Not mercy, not charity, but restitution. The steady smell of old leather and cigarette smoke. Taehyung sat across from YN at a low table, the file with legal papers folded neatly to one side. The city hummed faintly beyond the window. Inside, the room was all hush and power. "I'm going to take everything the Lees stole and put it in your name," Taehyung said plainly. "Title, shares, land, everything Min's left. You'll be legally their heir." In's eyes widened so huge they made her face look childlike. "TH many dollars," she whispered, bewildered. "Does that mean I can buy lots of chocolate? And makeup, and clothes?" And she counted on her fingers, "and a home that's not scary." Taehyung blinked, a faint, almost amused crease at the corner of his mouth. He'd expected anger, fear, bargaining, not this. "Yes," he replied after a moment, the word clipped. "You could buy anything." She looked down at the small envelope still tucked in her bag, the place where Jiho's savings had been. She imagined piles of bills, mountains of sweets, shelves and shelves of dresses. Her voice was small and practical. "But where will I keep so much money? I don't have a box big enough. I don't even have a proper drawer." Taehyung sighed, and for the first time his breath sounded tired. The complicated map of court filings and asset seizures and traps that he designed seemed suddenly ridiculous against the image of a girl picturing money in a drawer. "You don't keep it in a drawer," he said softly, then, unable to resist, added with sharpness, "You'll have lawyers, banks, trustees." "We handle it." YN chewed her lip, still baffled. "Banks, trustees, is that like a friend who keeps things?" Before Taehyung could answer, Jungkook stepped back into the doorway with a tablet. Taehyung's jaw tightened and his tone shifted cold as steel. "If you refuse to cooperate, there are other methods." He tapped the table with a knuckle, slow and deliberate. "Refuse, and I'll find a place for you to reconsider your stubbornness somewhere warm with company you'll enjoy." His eyes flicked to the darker part of the room. In's face drained of color. "What place?" she stammered. Taehyung's mouth flattened. "A basement with rats." "Until you say yes." The words landed like a punch. For a long second, all she could hear was her own heartbeat. Then, in a small, terrified voice that cracked at the edges, she screamed, "No." No, her feet slammed against the bed instinctively as if to anchor herself. Tears sprang to her eyes. "I mean yes. Yes, I will file the case. I'll do it. Please, no basement." Taehyung's expression softened for the briefest moment, so briefly that even Jungkook might have missed it, then hardened again into the merciless calm he wore like armor. He nodded once. "Good girl." At that moment there was a soft knock on the guest room door. Taehyung gave a curt gesture and the servants entered, 2 men carrying suit bags, a maid trailing with boxes. They laid them carefully on the bed and bowed. "Change of clothes, Miss Lee. Please, take what you need," one of them said with practiced politeness. YN stared at the piles, fabrics she'd never seen up close: silk, chiffon, crisp cotton folded like small miracles. Shoes lined up like rows of sleeping birds. Her fingers hovered over a dress and trembled. It had been ages, years since she'd worn anything that hadn't come from a cousin's cast-off pile. Taehyung said over his shoulder as he moved to leave, voice low and almost casual, "Take a shower." "You look worse than a beggar." She glanced at him, confused and oddly grateful, as the servants backed out politely. The door clicked shut and she was alone with the clothes, the ring warm on her finger and the chain heavy at her throat. In sank onto the bed and reached for a dress. The fabric slid through her hands like water. When she lifted it up, it fell in a perfect line, soft, clean, sewn to fit a person, not a rag. She had to hold it against herself, awkward and unpracticed, imagining how it would feel to wear something that hadn't been an insult before it was cast out. Her hands shook as she ended the hair tie, letting her hair fall. She stepped into the bathroom, the tile cold under her feet, and for the first time in years stood under hot water that did not sting from work or punishment but soothed. She scrubbed away the grime, the smell of the mansion, the taste of humiliation. When she stepped out, the steam clung to her skin like permission. Dressed now in a simple but elegant dress of soft cream that brightened her skin, she stared at her reflection. The girl looking back had the same bad shoulders and the same cautious eyes, but something had shifted. The posture was different, the way the dress sat on her body like a promise more than a costume. She reached up to touch the ring and the chain, clutching them like they were anchors to the past. Then she glanced toward the door, half expecting Taehyung to smirk and scoff at the sight, but the room stayed quiet. Outside, Taehyung's silhouette moved down the hallway. He paused in the doorway, watching her for a heartbeat. There was no expression that would betray him, just the measured shadow of a man who decided to make the world pay. Then he turned away and left, leaving YN in a new dress and the soft, terrifying knowledge that her life had just been peeled open and stitched differently. She sat on the bed, the dress rustling, feeling like she had been given an impossible thing and not knowing whether to be grateful, afraid, or furious. The clothes smelled faintly of the people who had bought them, the lives they represented. Breathed in slowly and let herself believe just for a second that she could keep hold of more than the 2 pieces of jewelry hidden under her shirt. Outside, the city lights flickered like distant stars. Inside, a small, guarded part of her heart whispered, maybe this time, maybe things could change. She sat on the bed, the dress rustling, feeling like she had been given an impossible thing and not knowing whether to be grateful, afraid, or furious. The clothes smelled faintly of the people who had bought them, the lives they represented. Breathed in slowly and let herself believe just for a second that she could keep hold of more than the 2 pieces of jewelry hidden under her shirt. Outside, the city lights flickered like distant stars. Inside, a small, guarded part of her heart whispered, maybe this time, maybe things could change. The Lee mansion was buzzing as usual with noise and arrogance. The wives were sipping tea in the drawing room, dripping in jewelry that wasn't theirs, while the cousins argued over who would get the new imported car parked in the garage. A sharp knock came at the front door. One of the maids rushed to open it and returned with a white envelope sealed with the stamp of the High Court of Seoul. Han-jun frowned, grabbing it. What is this nonsense? The entire family gathered as he tore it open. The sound of the paper ripping seemed to echo in the hall. His eyes scanned the first line, notice of claim and petition for execution of last will and testament, Lee Min-soo. Han-jun's face drained of color. What is this? Elder Lee snatched the paper from his son's trembling hands, adjusting his glasses. His voice quivered as he read aloud, all assets belonging to the late Lee Min-soo, including properties, stocks, and financial holdings, are hereby recognized under the legal heirship of his daughter, Lee YN. All parties currently residing on said assets are ordered to present themselves in court within 30 days to submit accountings of unauthorized usage. A pin-drop silence followed. The wives dropped their teacups. One shattered against the marble floor. Jin-ho's face twisted in disbelief. This is impossible. That little brat, she's a nothing. A servant in this house. How could? One of the cousins, pale as paper, whispered, It has the court seal. It's real. They're recognizing her as the heir. Han-jun slammed the table, his voice trembling with fury. Who did this? Who dug this up after all these years? Elder Lee's hand shook as he flipped to the back page, his lips barely forming the words, filed through Attorney Park Hyman. At the name, dread spread like poison. Everyone in the room stiffened. Park Hyman, the infamous lawyer, untouchable in the city, known for ripping dynasties apart in court. And behind him, everyone knew, was only one man. KIMTAEHYUNG. The realization hit like a thunderclap. He has her, one of the wives whispered, voice cracking. That's why she disappeared. Kim Taehyung has her. The room erupted in panic. They'll take everything, the houses, the shares, even the bank accounts. The once Bradleys who had mocked, beaten, and humiliated YN for years now stood trembling, realizing that the girl they had treated like a servant was about to hold their fates in her hands. And worse, Kim Taehyung was going to make sure the world watched. The grand dining hall of the Kim mansion glowed under crystal chandeliers. The long table was already set, silver gleaming, dishes steaming. A quiet hum of servants moved in perfect rhythm, every gesture precise. One of them climbed the stairs and bowed slightly at the guest room door. "Miss Lee, boss has requested your presence for dinner." YN blinked, startled. Her hands twisted nervously in the folds of her new dress. Dinner with him? She hesitated, then smoothed her hair, glanced at the shoes by her bed, and carefully slipped into them. When she stepped into the hallway and descended the grand staircase, it felt surreal, like walking into a world she had only ever seen from far away. Her dress brushed softly against her legs. Her shoes clicked faintly on the marble. Taehyung sat at the head of the table, posture relaxed yet commanding. He was idly scrolling through something on his phone, but the moment his eyes lifted and found her, he forgot to look away. The sight of her stopped him cold. Her hair, washed and loose, shimmered under the light. The simple dress fit her perfectly, transforming her from the timid girl who trembled in fear into something luminous like a princess who had stepped out of a dream. For a man who never let his guard down, his chest betrayed him. One sharp, unsteady beat, then another. YN, catching his gaze, froze mid-step. His eyes were dark and unreadable, but locked so intently on her that her cheeks heated. She looked down quickly, flustered, and clutched her skirt, blushing under the weight of his attention. The air stretched tight, then Taehyung blinked, as if snapping out of something, and cleared his throat with a quiet cough. "Sit." His tone was low, back to composed, but not as steady as usual. She nodded quickly and slipped into the chair beside him. The servants began serving, steaming bowls of soup, freshly baked bread, rich cuts of meat, gleaming salads, and dishes she couldn't even name. The aromas filled the hall. YN's eyes widened. Her hands trembled faintly over the spoon. She had forgotten what real food looked like. For years she had eaten scraps, cold leftovers, and whatever her cousins tossed aside. But here everything was warm, fresh, beautiful. She whispered without realizing, "It smells so good." Taehyung glanced at her, his lips twitching faintly. The moment the first bite touched her tongue, her restraint cracked. She devoured hungrily, eyes shining with excitement, cheeks puffed, spoon clinking against the bowl like a child rediscovering a forgotten joy. She didn't notice the way Taehyung watched her. The cold mafia king who had seen blood, betrayal, and empire's fall sat in silence, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Not mocking, not cruel, simply soft, rare, almost foreign to him. He had seen people eat before, but never like this, never with such raw, innocent delight. And for the first time in years, Kim Taehyung felt warmth creep into the quiet place in his chest where only shadows used to live.